Hi there, and welcome to part 2 of Red Canary's crash course on Microsoft 365 Defender, a video series in which we simulate a threat and walk you through how it manifests in Microsoft's XDR suite of services, as well as in Red Canary. My name is Alex Spiliotis, and I'm a senior manager at Red Canary, and I'm joined by my colleague Joe Savini, a principal Microsoft solutions specialist at Red Canary. So as I mentioned, this is part 2 of a video series, and in part 1, we provided an overview of Microsoft 365 Defender, Red Canary, and how we work together to protect customers. We also walked through the threat that we're simulating, and in short, it's a 3-phase attack. First, the adversary harvests a given user's credentials via a phishing email, gets access to their inbox, and creates email forwarding rules, forwarding all mail this user receives to an external inbox owned by the adversary. And lastly, the user unfortunately executes a malicious binary attached to the email, and the adversary gains access to the user's machine. So as I mentioned, today we'll walk through how all that activity manifests in both the Microsoft 365 Defender console, as well as in Red Canary. And with that, I can now kick it over to Joe, who will take you into the 365 Defender console.
Thanks, Alex. So thank you for the summary of the attack, and that kind of sets up our dive into Defender really well here. So a lot of you guys, you probably have Defender, you've seen Microsoft 365 Defender console before, and you're really kind of comfortable with what it looks like. If you're not comfortable, that's okay too, because what we're going to do is we're going to just dive into a couple of the alerts, a couple of the incidents as they pertain to this attack. We're going to work on how would we triage this? So, inside of Defender, there's a lot of different views. And as you're using the application, I really want you to think about context, because contextualization of our information is absolutely critical with what we do during the security investigation process. An easy way to get a list of alerts that we're working with is by clicking on incidents and alerts and jumping right down into alerts. I've already scoped our alert view because it's quite voluminous inside of our lab environment. So I've scoped this to the timeline and the activity that we're really looking for this user. So as Alex mentioned, there was a phishing email involved. There was also some malicious binary that was downloaded and executed. And so where I want you to draw your attention is starting here on the 16th and moving forward in time, right? So as we start, what we see is we see alerts that are coming in, and we see alerts from a number of different products. And that's what's really great about Defender as an XDR platform. As I expand this, what you'll see is under detection source, all of these columns are actually filterable. So you can jump up here, you can customize the columns, you can filter by specific products or service sources to really hone in on the information that you're looking for specific to your investigation. Now, to our investigation, we're not exactly sure what happened. If we're kind of make believe that we're security ops right now, we see a lot of different information coming in at once. And, we have to kind of assemble in our minds and in Defender what we think actually happened here that's related to this incident. So we see a couple of different things here. Activity from an infrequent country. We see an anomalous token, a couple anonymous IP addresses. Now, if you recall, looking back into the attack scenario, the attacker did use Tor, so that kind of makes sense. We do see this password spray here. That's kind of an interesting conclusion that Defender has drawn that I don't know that I agree with. So let's kind of have a peek at that and see where they're getting that information from. So it looks like we have identified, Defender has identified what it believes to be a password spray attack. And so this is the information that I want you to keep in mind as we pivot to the Red Canary portal later on, because really what we're doing is we're trying to illustrate how do we bridge the gap? How do we go from a list of alerts in Defender and incidents that kind of make sense, but don't fully make sense because we don't have any human intelligence applied to them, to a timeline that's fully fleshed out that makes a ton of sense, that really illustrates what was going on. So we have a couple different things here. It looks like Azure AD Identity Protection pulled in some data about this user, Defender for cloud apps, and then Defender for Office. So the attacker did create these forwarding rules. Let's go ahead and just get an idea of what those rules look like. So we're going to open up a tab and we're going to dive into that rule. And so let's get a little bit more information, expanding this. It doesn't look like this has a ton of information. Just a mail rule was created. We could classify it here. On the right-hand side, a lot of times you're going to be given some additional details. And what's important to think about is context. So this is related to two specific incidents that we're going to be taking a closer look at to see what Defender came up with from an incident perspective. And here we go. Let's dive into that incident. And we see an attack story. Now, this is actually pretty good, right? If we sit back and think about what actually happened in our attack scenario, we know that there was a phish. So it looks like Defender was able to identify and extract that we have this, this entity here. And this is why I said always think of these alerts in context of an entity, because if we click on this, there's things that we can do and interact with inside this layout, including grouping these items together, changing the way that the entities are laid out or aligned inside the incident graph. It really helps to paint a picture of what happened here. And it actually will link these together. But if we look at the alerts that were discovered as part of this, we do see the phish, we do see the users. What we don't see is the endpoint activity. And so it looks like even though the user was on a registered device here, this demo user, even though they were on a device and there's a device associated with this user, for some reason, Defender didn't pull that in for us. So this is the stuff we have to be aware of. And that's why I said always think of it in context of when you're performing your investigation, when you're looking through things, always think of it in context of like, what are all the items that we have for these particular entities, and how do we interrogate them one by one to draw a better conclusion of what happened. Now, if we jump back to our original alert view, what we can see is we walk this down the line, we see demo user, demo user, demo user, demo user, and then we see that there was a malware hit. And it was right at the same time. Now, it was on this RC demo workstation, which is a separate machine. So if we open up that alert page, we're going to get a little bit more information from an endpoint perspective on what happened inside of the device timeline, right? So that's an important piece of that context that we definitely want to be able to loop in, but it doesn't look like Microsoft has looped that in for us. But even though Microsoft didn't loop that in, it did bring in quite a good amount of information. And in order to kind of pivot through each of those and work through the context, you can just jump through inside of an incident view or inside of an alert view to get different pieces of that information and different pieces of that story and bring them forward. Okay. So don't kind of like run into a corner when you're doing these investigations. That's one of the number one takeaways. Always think about it like a Rubik's Cube, and you're just constantly kind of rotating it, and you're constantly looking to see how can I get a different view on the same series of information in a way that maybe it fits together. And so that's what we're really going to do here until we can see if we can draw a better conclusion. So we saw that there were some rules created. We didn't have a whole lot of context with that. Perhaps there's a better alert that will give us some information there. I'm going to go ahead and open up this alert that's associated with that incident. And it doesn't look like it has all of that information. There might be there's a rule, the rule creation fire up here. Let's jump into that. So this is better. Here we are. So this is what I mean about making sure. So we had two different types of alerts related to the inbox rule. One of them gave us basically some metadata and it was pretty simple. And then the other actually gave us a lot more information and context on what the IP address was, where the location was, the browser that the attacker may have been using, and the exact commands that they executed as the user in context. So all of these can be pulled together to create some TTPs that you could use to forward analyze or hunt. And that's kind of a little bit of a teaser for what we're going to be doing inside the next video. But the idea is you could extract some of these. So if you're aware that they're part of the incident that you're working on, you can extract them and use them to sweep more broadly to find out like, hey, besides this one section that we're trying to temporarily isolate, are there any other instances of this type of behavior more largely inside of our environment? And so that's something that you can do to apply intelligence to your environment from the context of these incidents. Microsoft is doing their absolute best with just essentially just AI ML and working to link these together. And honestly, they're doing a really great job. You're getting some context here. You're getting the user, you're getting alerts that are associated, even inboxes, and pivoting into each of these. It's going to like opening up any of these links. Most of the stuff inside of Defender is clickable. So make sure if you take anything away from this series, it's that. When you click on a link, it's going to give you the context view for the information that you clicked on. So if you click on an IP address, expect to get network information, like what alerts was that IP address associated with. If you click on something like a mailbox, you're going to get the same kind of thing, right? You're going to get like, what are the alerts that this particular mailbox was associated with? Is there any other pieces of information associated with this mailbox? Sometimes stuff takes a long time to load too, but that's okay. We can always come back to it. But just think of things in terms of context. Exchange Online, you're going to get all the alerts inside of Exchange if you click that. If you click on a particular alert, now that's going to give you a series of pieces of metadata that you can drill down into again. So you click on an alert, like this one's specific to Tor. It was part of the incident that took place, and you're going to start to get pieces of metadata, right? So these are contextual pieces of information up here. We have application, we have an address, and we have a user account. And if you click that, you can open a user page, you can open an IP address page, or you can go ahead and open the app page, and you're going to go ahead and get any of the context associated with each of those pieces of information. And from there, you can actually begin to classify things. You can update your incident page if it makes sense for you to do that. And that's the basis of triage, right? So you do your alert review, you do your incident review, you go through all of the alerts and try to find a way to make the puzzle pieces fit together the best that you can. And I would definitely recommend using Microsoft's built-in tools as much as you can if you're limited to the Microsoft 365 console, by classifying the alerts or adding alerts to existing incidents. You can manage incidents up here. So there's a lot of different workflow options from within Defender in terms of incident management. They can be assigned to specific users. You can add comments. So it's fairly powerful in the options that it gives you. So I would definitely recommend, leveraging it to the best of your ability to go ahead and find all the information. Now, in the next series of videos, we're going to go a little bit deeper outside of just the incident and alert view, and we're going to dive into advanced hunting, and we're going to talk about some of the response actions that Defender has as well. But we're also going to talk about everything that we do on the Red Canary side, and Alex is going to be here to guide us through that. So right now, Alex is going to take us through, kind of, rather than just this alert view, rather than just seeing inside Defender, seeing it the way a Red Canary customer would see it, and kind of trying to resolve some of those discrepancies that we lose inside of Defender to draw a much more complete picture. So Alex, you want to go ahead and take it away, and we'll see what that looks like inside of Red Canary?
Sure thing, Joe. One sec. All right, thanks, Joe. So as Joe mentioned, we're now looking at this threat, the phishing, credential harvesting, binary executing threat that Joe just walked through in 365 Defender. This is how it manifests in Red Canary. I'll now take you through this threat page from top to bottom, kind of stopping to highlight a few things that I think are pretty neat and pretty efficient and appealing about how Red Canary synthesizes all that data that Joe just showed you and makes it very easy to digest, for someone who maybe is a little less of an expert in security, or someone who's really experienced, is a technical practitioner, and really wants to get into the nitty-gritty of the threat. So starting at the top, you'll see we classify the threat just right at the top: malicious software, a post-exploitation tool affecting the specific workstation. And right below that, I was going to say in quotes, but I don't see a second quote. So in quote is a custom annotation from the Red Canary detection engineer who worked on this threat and who pieced together all the disparate pieces of data to kind of make sense of everything. So again, just as we told you and we walked through in 365 Defender, a user accessed a malicious URL via Microsoft Office 365, created email forwarding rules, and there were some geographically suspicious logins. As Joe pointed out in 365 Defender, affected endpoint and associated identity data is there, but it's not really tied together as neatly, perhaps as we do here in Red Canary. So as a matter of practice, we are going to correlate endpoints with identities and bring them above the fold when we publish a threat to our portal, or so when we notify the customer that there's a threat. It's if you think about it, for ransomware attacks, obviously containing the threat on your endpoints and preventing endpoint compromise is critical. Business email compromise is heavily tied to being able to monitor and protect your identities. So we bring identity information to the fore. So we're really conscious of the most common and most impactful type threats and giving you information you need to mitigate them as soon as possible as you're understanding our work here on the threats page. Scrolling down more, so for a more technical practitioner or someone who wants to drill down, we map our threats to MITRE attack tactics and techniques where possible. Here, we observed lateral movement and defense evasion. We actually also show you the specific detectors that the Red Canary developed, are kind of our custom proprietary detectors that tipped us off to this behavior and thus the threat. We also let you know what contributed to our determining this was a threat. So in this case, it's behavior. We have thousands of behavior-based detections that tip us off to suspicious activity. So those fired in this case. Additionally, you'll see first party. So we have a proprietary intelligence team, or threat intelligence team is what the way you may have heard of it, that constantly stays on top of emerging threats and trends in even persistent ongoing threats and threat actors. And that proprietary information combined with third-party threat intelligence can contribute to our determination of a threat in your environment. In this case, first party, so our internal Red Canary threat intelligence contributed. Also, as I'll show momentarily, as Joe showed you, Microsoft alerts fired when he was simulating this threat. In fact, Microsoft blocked malware related to this threat, right? So third-party information contributed to our determination of this as a threat. And lastly, there was this software was on a publisher block list, so that tipped us off as well. But as you can see, the threat analytics pane is really helpful if you're maybe a little bit more of a experienced security practitioner, or you have to relay a little bit more nuanced information about the type of threat that you're facing. So going down further, we also, again, we want to be very transparent, show you what we looked at to make the call on the severity and level and scope of the threat. So in this case, there aren't any other threats in your environment related to this threat. And we analyze certain events that are not listed below in the threat timeline that I'll walk through shortly. But there are a few other events that we looked at and that helped orient us as we were analyzing this threat on your behalf. And scrolling down further, so this is, I really like this element of our threats page. It's our threat timeline. So this is where we kind of show our work. So both in terms of how Red Canary brings data from across your tools and across your environment to bear on the determination of a threat, but also how proprietary Red Canary information contributed to our detection, investigation and response to a threat. So at the top of the threat timeline here, we see an alert, the alert from Azure AD Identity Protection related to an anonymous IP address. That part below here is annotated by one of the Red Canary detection engineers who worked on this threat and made the determination. And just something to point out, if you think back to 2 minutes ago when Joe was in 365 Defender, again, very powerful tools, a lot of information, surfacing a lot of information. But, if you're like many security teams, you're really buried in alerts. And you even saw as Joe was moving in 365 Defender, he moved with speed and confidence that not everyone who's not kind of living in the tool every day will have. So this right here, we knew, because of our expertise and our ability to look across your environment, we pulled this alert out as relevant to the determination of and the scope of this threat. But just again, thinking about what it was like in 365 Defender and maybe your experience dealing with a large queue of alerts, many of which are high severity, you might not even see that alert on the day that it arises, right? Depending on the alert volume your organization faces. So just wanted to point that out. Next, you'll see, this is a Red Canary detection. So we detected, as Microsoft did, that email forwarding rules were created. But what I like about the Red Canary entry here is just the amount of relevant information that we surface up front. So we bring the identity into the entry, the actual email rule, and again, the detector that tipped us off to this behavior, session information, network address, and then a human annotation at the bottom again. So putting this email rule in the context of that anonymous IP address, this is obviously suspicious behavior. Going down further, you see, we show you your tools working for you, right? We show you Defender at work. So we analyzed and we brought in that alert from Defender that said that the Swart malware was blocked. And then scrolling down further, what I think is most relevant is here. So this in this process spawn by explorer.exe. This is a proprietary Red Canary detection that we wrote that tipped us off to this behavior. And in this situation, we detected that PS exec was being renamed, and this is a program that allows exfiltration of information from a given host to a different entity. This right here is highly suspicious, definitely indicative of a serious threat. So once we got to this point, having all that other information in context, we would proactively reach out to the customer, letting them know that there's a significant problem, and we'd be available to guide them through response and remediation, to help. There's a chance we would have already set up automated playbooks that could have contained this threat for the customer, and we offer remediation, so hands-on keyboard support to remediate threats on endpoints for customers. So that's kind of in summary the threat page in Red Canary that corresponds to the threat we walked through in Microsoft 365 Defender. In our next video, we'll walk through response and remediation, again, both in 365 Defender and in Red Canary. And Joe, anything else to add that you think I missed?
No, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, again, yeah, in our next video, we'll walk through response and remediation in Microsoft 365 Defender and in Red Canary, so you can see how it looks in both sets of tools. But yeah, for now, thanks very much for your time, and look forward to seeing you tune in to the next video.